Christ is still the King.
Welcome to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr on Iowa Catholic Radio. Every Wednesday, diving deep in the truth of the Catholic Church and restoring all things in Christ. The Uncommon Good, live from the Mercy Live Up studio.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner. Hello, Bud?
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
There you are. Hey.
There I am.
Yep. So I'm coming live from the Mercy Live Up studio in Des Moines, Iowa. Bud is coming from these United States of America over in a time zone away in the future.
We got you outnumbered today. 2 Pittsburghians on the show. So this show is more coming from, it's coming from your studio.
It's coming from here through Pittsburgh, but actually through 1150 AM, 88.5 FM, 94.5 FM, streaming live, iowacatholicradio.com. And if you have the Iowa Catholic Radio app from Blessed Ministries and the People's Abstract Company, you can listen to it, for instance, even in Pittsburgh, California, Hawaii, everywhere. And, so we got Bud with us today. Bud, how is the world treating you?
I thought you were about to make a Trinitarian analogy there.
Which one?
We were coming through your studio with Pittsburgh interviews. You know, like in the 70s and 80s, I guess, in theological writing, you could use the Trinity to make an analogy to so many things.
Right.
And it got carried away.
That's right. And I think we've all sang a hymn where we were getting confused about, like, are we talking about prepositions? Is this grammar class? And instead it was just like a not Dan Rather, what's his name? Who's the guy who wrote all of those hymns in the 70s? Not Dan.
Oh, yeah. We better, I'm not, Dan, it is a Dan.
Yeah, it's Dan. Oh, old Danny boy. That's
Dan.
what we'll call him.
So, speaking of prepositions, did you go with your kids trick-or-treating?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about being a Bonner is someone, or at least part of my family, gets sick every Halloween. This year it was the whole kit and caboodle. They all got hand, foot, and mouth, so instead of dressing up and looking like zombies, they looked like zombies. And, so in Des Moines they do Beggar's Night, so we didn't get to do Beggar's Night. We didn't get to do All Saints parties or anything like that. Yesterday they were finally feeling good enough that we went to the mall and, got candy. Which was so it was basically, Bud, everything. If there were flying robots giving you the candy is the only way I could have hated it worse. It was in a mall, people in the store obviously bought cheap candy and were angry about it. We're sort of throwing it at kids. No, there were nice people, I'm joking, but I hated it. In my mind, I'm making it worse. But what about you? Did you actually have a good Halloween, a happy Halloween?
Well, I have to say, I don't know if it's my neighborhood or just Pittsburgh in general, but it was huge.
Really?
I mean, it was like a feast day in Pittsburgh, and going door to door, and they were sticking French fries in each kid's bag.
That's what I was really hoping is just that candy, and then just a cup full of fries on top of it every time.
We can't complain because we were out for about an hour and a half, and we have literally a mound of candy on our living room floor. But my oldest daughter, there was 2 funny things with Malin. One is she designed this amazing robot suit.
I saw it. It is, in fact, amazing.
But she couldn't walk. She was like that kid in A Christmas Story. And so, the other, the 6-year-olds and 4-year-olds were, jetting in front of her. And she's like, but she's got such a sweet spirit. I'm like, Malin, you want to take your robot body off? And she's like, no, I got to stick with this. And so she's dropping candy, and I don't know. I could tell she was frustrated, but she had that kind of Catholic penitential. I'm going to push through it.
Right, that seems right. Yeah.
But the second thing is they didn't do French fries, but there was a lot of variety, and so Madeline's like, I don't want to complain, but I was mostly interested in chocolate, and she got potato chips and
what?
Well, I mean they're in bags, little snack bags, and then this slushy thing. I think the houses were saying we want to stand out.
Oh.
It was almost like a competition in our neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So one family had a stand, and they were serving adult beverages. That there was an adult station and a kid station. So.
Wow. Well, look, if you want to redesign Halloween where you go around and various barbecued meats are handed out, I'd probably be way more behind it. I'm still not going to dress up, but, maybe for free barbecue.
Well, I know we got to get to our underwriters, but one last thing. Next year we should think about, ahead of time, and have our friend David Mills on the show. He wrote that article about like how Halloween's taken kind of a dark turn with decorations, and should we celebrate it?
Uh-huh.
And I found like the real way to alienate listeners is not to talk about doctrine, but to talk about things like homeopathy and celebrating Halloween.
Yeah, no, that's really true. Like, if you really want to like divide and conquer, bring up very cherished traditions that date back to 1985.
Yeah.
That's the way to make people mad.
Yeah.
Well, brought to you as always.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great. By Cartridge World, industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print. Great, perfect for business, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies, including ink, toner, paper, and printers. Business customers, pickup deliveries available. Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, online, cartridgeworld.com. And then also, as always, brought to you by Mercy College of Health Sciences. So, Bud, I know you're in Pittsburgh, but if you happen to fly here by noon our time, Bud, we're actually having an All Saints Mass. So if anybody's downtown and needs to hit a Mass for All Saints, we're having that at the Sister Zita Brennan Hall Chapel. And then we also have coming up November 9th, on Thursday at 6 o'clock, we're having our Faith and Healing series with Dr. Abraham Nussbaum. Do you have anything to like really, tell the folks about Abraham? Bud and I both went to school with him.
Well, when you were going through graduate school, didn't your wife Robin kind of serve as she worked as a nanny for their family?
Oh yeah, we lived with them.
So I wasn't, and so they trusted you guys with their children. I don't know if that's a mark in his favor or against him,
or his bad judgment. I wasn't taking care of the kid. I was mostly just eating way too much hamburger for how comfortable they were.
No, he's great personally as a personal friend, but just. I think his writing's really interesting. It's a real treat. I feel like this time of year, you get past All Saints and you're headed towards Thanksgiving, and there's a little bit of a lull. If you're a student, like the semesters, it's kind of like the dog days of summer as a student. But this is like, I feel like the November Faith and Healing is will put a pep in your step.
Agreed. So make sure to come get your pep in your step November 9th on Thursday, downtown Mercy College of Health Sciences at 6 o'clock, free and open to the public, heavy hors d'oeuvres, which means yummy hors d'oeuvres. So, Bud, after the break, we're going to come back and we have, like you said, fellow Pittsburghian Brandon McGinley, editor of EWTN at EWTN Publishing, but he's a speaker and writer. And, so were you guys eating some French fried salad and you're like, hey, you should come on the radio?
We were eating something. I don't think it was French salad with French fries, but Brandon's a great speaker. He's written some interesting things. We're going to talk about the restoration of Catholic culture and how this ties into evangelism. I think he'll have some good things to say today.
It's going to be great, folks, so stick around. We're going to go to our break, and when we come back, Bo, Bud, and Brandon, plenty of bees to go around on your All Saints Day. So stick around, The Uncommon Good. We'll be right back.
Ladies, you are invited to our next Mosaic Luncheon on Thursday, November 9th at St. Pius Church in Urbandale. Join Marilyn Jerome as she takes you on her personal journey from the star to the cross, an inspirational story about her conversion from Judaism to Catholicism. So come, enjoy a free meal, and bring your friends to our last luncheon in our fall series. Doors open at 11:30 with the program running from 12 to 1. RSVP at iowacatholicradio.com and make your soul active in Christ.
The Catholic solution to the healthcare problem is here. Paying too much for your healthcare costs? Solidarity Health Shares is a healthcare sharing ministry which provides an ethical way to fund healthcare costs while protecting and practicing our Catholic beliefs. Best yet, Solidarity Health Shares members are exempt from the fines and penalties in the Affordable Care Act. For more info, call 844-313-4999, again 844-313-4999, or visit solidarityhealthshare.org. That's solidarityhealthshare.org.
Support for The Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
Here is your forecast on Iowa Catholic Radio. We will be breezy throughout the afternoon. Cloud cover sticking around with a high in the upper 40s near 50. Southeast winds may gust up to 20, even 25 miles per hour. Tonight, our low temperature near 40, and then a few showers may drift our way early tomorrow with a high 52. Friday, 49. The weather is brought to you by Divine Treasures Catholic Book and Gift Store, celebrating 25 years of service to the greater Des Moines community. I'm meteorologist Dan Holliday on Iowa Catholic Radio. We're
back with the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Bud Marr. I want to commend... Whoa, wow. The robots were mad. I want to commend the board people because we've been having some issues. I think our board is haunted. Woo! The day after spooky Halloween. So I want to always commend Jeb and Deacon Tony figuring out the boards for all of us. So yeah. So Bud, are you still there?
Yes, I'm back on.
Good. So Bud, if you would mind doing the honors, we have a fellow Pittsburgh friend with us today. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce him.
So Brandon McGinley from Pittsburgh here works as editor at EWTN Publishing. He's also a writer and speaker. He's written in a number of contexts, including the National Review, Human Life Review, First Things, Public Discourse. The list goes on. Brandon, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me, Bud.
Yeah. I didn't really warn you about this when we were emailing about the show today, but I was wondering, we were talking on Sunday, and you shared some about your own faith journey. Sure. I think it's applicable to what we're talking about this morning. Would you mind sharing just a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, no problem. Excuse me. Yeah, so I mean, for like a lot of Pittsburghers, I was born and raised in a Catholic family. Went back several generations, both in the church and in Pittsburgh. But as so often seemed to be the case at the time I was growing up in the 90s, it certainly seemed like kind of, devotion to the faith was kind of petering out generation by generation. And so that then matched what I was observing in the culture at large. And so it was easy then by the time I was in high school to basically say, well, being an intelligent, modern 21st century, or at least soon to be 21st century young person, have moved beyond all of this, childish silliness of faith. And even though I still believed a lot of things, certainly about the church's moral teaching, but I didn't really recognize it being the church's. It was just the way I was raised, and these things seemed right to me. I was no longer going to mass, and my family had kind of become the Christmas and Easter people we used to look sideways at in church on those days. And as I was talking, as I said to Bud over the weekend, there was no moment when we just decided we weren't going to church anymore. It just slowly faded away. And at any given moment, you wouldn't have said that anything had changed. But then all of a sudden, after a few years of, not going every once in a while because we were hosting a party or something, and we decided we were just too busy and tired to go to Mass, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, it becomes, only Christmas and Easter. So for my part then, I had a kind of reversion experience in college, in large part due to the excellent Catholic campus ministry at my university, and due to friends who, subtly but persistently needled me to go to Mass with them. And the fact of the matter was that at my university, the university chapel was while not a specifically Catholic church, was really a quite beautiful church. And the Mass was reverent. I was surrounded by young people who knew their stuff and understood the Mass. And the music was beautiful. The priests were solid. And so, all of a sudden, I kind of began to understand both intellectually why a lot of the things that I was still thinking about moral issues actually made sense only in the context of the church, or at least primarily in the context of the church. But then also I found myself kind of re-enchanted by the liturgy and by the life of the church generally. And so that kind of, leads me to where I am today.
So your story, in my mind, is representative of a lot of younger Catholics these days. studies have shown that the millennial generation is particularly allergic to so-called, like what you might call institutional religion. And then people have talked about the rise of the nuns, this growing group where they might say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't practice any faith. I know this is a complex topic, but what sort of factors do you think are behind these trends where we see younger Americans with lower practices of the faith?
There are so many things. Like I said, from my own experience, I observed what I observed in the culture was masked by my own personal experience, by what I observed in kind of my own little world, and so everything kind of came together. There wasn't much by way of a countervailing force in my own personal life and in my own private circles to upend what appeared to be going on in the culture, which was this idea that had been going on, of course, that has been going on for centuries. The idea that kind of modern man has superseded religious belief, and I think my kind of pet argument, I suppose, it's not my pet argument, it's an argument that is a common argument, but it's something that I think is true, is that certainly at the time I was growing up, my catechesis was pretty milquetoast. It was pretty thin gruel, and part of that was because I'm guessing a lot of my catechists didn't really know their stuff. But even to the extent they did, I think that there was and has been and continues to be in some circles this idea that in order to attract young people to the faith, to keep them in the faith, we need to soft pedal the harder truths. We need to give them something that makes sense to them in the context of modernity, that makes sense to them in our cultural context, cultural and civilizational context. But that, in my experience, and I think in the experience of many other people, merely reaffirms what the culture says, which is that faith is childish, faith is old-fashioned. When in fact, what we need is a bold declaration of what is true, with a kind of a boldness and a countercultural kind of flair that would serve as a countervailing force to what's going on in the world around us.
This is The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. We are speaking with Brandon McGinley. Brandon, so one of the things that my favorite hobby is to get dead horses and then to continually beat them in all venues that I have a voice. And so one that I've had lately is what I'm making the metaphor with: how do we make bacteria resistant to antibiotics? And just stay with me, folks. It works out.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we make bacteria resistant antibiotics? Well, you keep giving doses that don't kill the bacteria, and if you do that long enough, the bacteria will become resistant, and then the antibiotics won't work at all. It seems to me that one of the ways we can describe what we're doing with our children is that we're inoculating the faith. It's not. It would be better to not give them anything, or to let them listen to Megadeth records their entire youth, so that when they actually hear the gospel for the first time, or where they hit rock bottom and actually hear the saving words of Jesus Christ, that it could actually convict them. But as it is, a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I mean, I know Christianity. Yeah, I'm Catholic, or, I know this stuff. And it makes it easy to ignore. I wonder if what you're saying maps up with this newfound dead horse I like beating.
Yeah, in fact, in the conversation we participated in over the weekend, that Bud and I participated in over the weekend, this came up, and I thought it was one of the most evocative metaphors for what's going on that I heard, this idea of inoculation, that we are giving a weak or worse, dead strain of the faith to our young people, which actually then kind of creates antibodies against it, so that when the real thing comes along, they're actually they resist it.
Yeah, I think that this it actually helps all sorts of different narratives than ours. I was sitting in a Hardee's getting breakfast because I am a Tubby's person and want to eat breakfast before I come on the radio. And the person in front of me had, one of those like Jesus fish that looks like a rocket, and it said science instead of Jesus. And I was and I was like, oh, you got me, right?
Right.
Because I realized that some people who talk about science, sorry to go off on this one, they talk about it like the evangelicals I grew up with in 1980s Oklahoma talking about Jesus. And I remember where I was when science first entered into my heart. And, and they talk about like science in this really emotional, personal way. And you're like, I thought it had to do with beakers and statistics, but whatever. Right. And what it is we've transferred some of that like living, powerful language of religion to all sorts of other things, love, science, whatever, precisely because the church, like you said, not necessarily in itself, but like we, the church, us, present a dead strain or a thin gruel.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. And the fact of the matter is that, humanity, part of human nature is to believe. We are believing creatures. We are religious creatures by our very nature. And so if that is not being satisfied through the church, it's going to be satisfied in other ways. And so in that way, science becomes a kind of religion. And both in the sense that it requires a certain amount of faith and belief. Now, of course, they kind of they try to soft pedal that by acting as if it's totally objective. But of course, nobody who's put more than 5 minutes of thought into it actually thinks that science is an ideology-free, objective zone of human inquiry. But more than that, it serves as an explanation for everything. It serves as a way for us to make sense of our world and of our experience, often in a nihilistic way when you get to the deep scientific materialism. And it then allows us a way to make sense of ourselves, and again, often in a nihilistic way. But if we are, and this speaking of dead horses, this is one of my dead horses that I often come back to beat, which is that in a world in which, in a civilization in which our identity is no longer in Christ, we're not just going to become radical autonomous individuals who can somehow create our own identity. We're going to find our identity elsewhere. For some people, they find not just meaning, but real deep personal identity in science, and in politics, and in other things, in the same way that the Christian finds identity in Christ and in his church.
What a friend we have in science. All is nothing, nil to Christ and to bear. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm thinking the whole time that you're talking about this. And when I hear that, I mean, Bud, we talk about this too. It starts to be our fault. Like, okay, if the church isn't going to pull this off, they're going to like go somewhere else to find, a savior. They want everlasting arms to lean on to like just keep up with the evangelical music jokes that I'm making, and they're going to go to Bill Nye if we don't present Jesus Christ. Yes.
Well, so in the context of these conversations, I should have warned you, Brandon, up front that Bo looks for excuses to sing on air. We have a whole highlight reel of Bo with a variety of genres. But I agree with the diagnosis, and we hear this and we see these kind of trends and these kind of developments taking place. To me, it seems like part of it has to do with our place in this particular society, and I feel like some of the articles I'm reading these days that Catholics feel less at home here, and yet that's kind of a double-edged sword, because in one way what we're saying is that our comfortability in America kind of created this sort of apathy, or at least contributed to it, and yet there's a growing concern that, like, well, we don't have a place, or that we're increasingly on the margin. So you have someone like Rod Dreher saying the goal is to practice this kind of Benedict option, to say, like we don't have a solid place here, and so we're going to kind of like create a tighter, more virtuous community at a local level. I guess what I'm getting at, and I'm not getting at very, very succinctly, is like So if someone is listening right now and they agree with kind of the diagnosis that we've been making, what sort of path do you see forward, in our time and place?
Yeah, that's the big question. That's the thing that everybody's thinking and talking about right now, and trying to figure out, what is a practical solution. And I wouldn't necessarily think in terms of solutions. I think solution is a bit too strong for it. But how do we live out the life of the church in the 21st century? In not just the 21st century, broadly speaking, but in this country, in this society, as you said, Bud. And so, Rod Dreher has kind of cornered the market on this discussion by kind of coining this Benedict option term. And I think, to the extent that that's become a brand name, it's almost not, not all that helpful to think in terms of it, because then it becomes like a fight. Instead of becoming an actual, discussion of how to live, it becomes a fight over what the Benedict option means, which is, a second or third order concern. But to my mind, I think it is. What Rod does get right is that we have to be thinking locally. We have to be thinking in terms of the little societies that we can build. Not on our own, but on our own in coordination with other families, in coordination with the life of the church as it currently stands. One of the things that's important to remember, throughout all of this is that even if every catechetical program in the country was perfect and was, teaching the truths of the faith in a clear and bold way, as long as these programs are 1 hour a week CCD programs, and then children go home to families where none of it is reinforced. I mean, I taught 8th grade CCD for a few years, and one of the most troubling questions I received was I was talking about confession to these 8th grade boys, and they were interested, and they seemed like they wanted to learn. And I had one student raise his hand and say, "What happens if my family won't take me to confession?" And so it just drives home how, no matter, as long as there is no sense of commitment to the faith within the family, there's not much that the church institutionally can do. So I think it has to begin there, and then radiate out from the family. And the big thing that I'm thinking about right now, and I might want to write something up about at some point, but it's very, very preliminary, is how can we learn from what Christian society has been, by Christian I specifically mean, societies that the church has served as, has kind of served as an integral force in. How have Christian societies successfully functioned in the past? What is the truth of what Christian society should be, and how can we as families, not as a country, because that's ridiculous. We live in a 300+ million, person country that is a functionally secular country. We can't talk about, it's ridiculous to talk about, turning the United States into a Catholic country. But what can we learn from what the truth of Christian societies or Catholic societies are for how families should act? How can we create little functioning societies within our larger society that would propagate the faith within that community, and B, serve as models to others of what a Christian society, what a beautiful community can be, and I think could be good for evangelization.
No, I was just talking with someone who recent converts, young man. He's here and helping with Catholic education, and he says the same thing. What do you do when the parents don't care? And I guess I'm just feeling feisty because it's All Saints Day and we're all hopped up on candy. But I'm all like, I think my best advice is for you to make the parents mad. And he's like, what? I'm like, tell the story about where the bears eat the children because they made fun of a prophet's bald head. I mean, tell the craziest stories in the Bible. Do whatever you can that the parents are mad enough to talk to you, because if they won't talk to you, you have no chance with the kids. So you may as well just go out guns blazing. And I think that this goes all the way back to what you were saying with the Benedict option, and not just, again, the reason I think it gets picked on, people are like, why does it get picked on? Well, it's just popular now. The problem is, to just go too far with a metaphor, if the inoculation theory is what we're worried about, right, that what we're doing is making, kids be inoculated to the gospel, the problem is so then people, even when you come up with the Benedict option or this solution or that, what you're still trying to do is take care of the problem in a single shot. Is there just some form of medicine or technique we can do? Yeah. And you're like, no, you just have to get getting the faith is like getting sick with chicken pox. You just have to break out with it totally. You have to, it has to infect you completely. There's no shortcuts. And I know that most people wouldn't expect you to make an analogy where the good of getting the gospel is like getting sick, but it's it's like chronic illness. It needs to get in your bones, and there's no delivery system that will just make that easy. It has to be that deep. And
at its best, the faith spreads virally, like a meme.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like a meme, like the plague, it spreads by contact. Holiness is contagious. I know it's all on my mind because my children just had hand, foot, and mouth. But folks, that's what it's supposed to be like, right? It should be that our faith and our holiness should be as noticeable as a nasty rash. And with that, I think we should probably go to break so people can think about that. Brandon, can you stick around after the break and join us in the second half of the show?
Absolutely.
All right, great. This is the Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr speaking with Brandon McGinley. We'll be back after these messages. Stick around.
Ladies, you are invited to our next Mosaic Luncheon on Thursday, November 9th at St. Pius Church in Urbandale. Join Marilyn Jerome as she takes you on her personal journey from the star to the cross, an inspirational story about her conversion from Judaism to Catholicism. So come, enjoy a free meal, and bring your friends to our last luncheon in our fall series. Doors open at 11:30 with the program running from 12 to 1. RSVP at iowacatholicradio.com and make your soul active in Christ.
The Catholic solution to the healthcare problem is here. Paying too much for your healthcare costs? Solidarity Health Shares is a healthcare sharing ministry which provides an ethical way to fund healthcare costs while protecting and practicing our Catholic beliefs. Best yet, Solidarity Health Shares members are exempt from the fines and penalties in the Affordable Care Act. For more info, call 844-313-4999, again 844-313-4999, or visit solidarityhealthshare.org. That's solidarityhealthshare.org.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
Hi, this is Marty McDonald with McDonald Imaging Solutions, and it's been my joy to support Iowa Catholic Radio by printing the famous Pope on a Stick fans used at the Iowa State Fair. We also printed the Our Catholic Schools Rock folders. McDonald Imaging Solutions is a family-owned business with over 1.5 million promotional items to choose from. We specialize in custom labeling, marketing, and corporate apparel. I personally help any business, big or small, to build their brand. Online at mcdonaldimigingsolutions.com. 276-2587.
We're back with the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr on this beautiful All Saints. And the robots, man, they're still after us. We have Brandon McGinley that we've been talking to. He is out Pittsburgh way. He does all sorts of cool stuff. He helps. He's a writer out with EWTN, but he's a writer and a speaker. He's on the circuit. Brandon, thanks for joining us for the second half of the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
So we were talking here in studio, Deacon Tony. We were deciding that there's the Benedict option and then these other things, but we've coined our own phrase, and it's Nasty-Rash Catholicism. That's what it should be. Nasty-Rash, contagious Catholicism. And if you didn't hear the first part of the show, you are very confused at this point. But suffice it to say that, like, the best evangelization is really the faith spreads virally. There's a way in which being in close proximity to holiness is what transmits holiness. And we're worried that we've inoculated young people especially, that they've developed antibodies by just knowing enough of the faith to hate it. I guess that's a good way to sum it up. And to say that whatever we're going to do to counter the culture has to start with that different type of approach. We're not having solutions or medicines or inoculations. Part of it is like, whatever else smelling like your sheep would be, like as Pope Francis says, it's being in close enough proximity that people can catch your love of Jesus Christ from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you mentioned chickenpox earlier, and the idea that, back in the day when people actually got chickenpox,
right,
you would know if you had chickenpox. Not you, but everyone around you would know if you had chickenpox. It was obvious. It was a visible thing. And I don't necessarily mean that we should, don a Catholic, put on a Catholic uniform so everybody knows exactly, whatever. But there should be something visible about the way we go about life that makes someone who would be a coworker, even if you don't say, "Hey, I'm a Catholic," it should be obvious there's something different. And I often think that, that if I were on the bus here in Pittsburgh, and if I were to see, say, a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf and reading her Quran, I would feel a certain kinship with her because she is being publicly religious in a way that I wouldn't with just a regular kind of secular business person who's just, scrolling through Facebook, which is likely what I would be doing on the bus.
Right.
But in a deeper way, I would say, wow, this willingness to kind of thumb your nose at the kind of the idea that anything public should be secular, to be praying in public, is something that I feel, like I said, a kinship with, and I wish I had the kind of the chutzpah to do.
Brandon, at the first half of the show, your thoughts about teaching catechesis, but then students' parents not being fully on board, that really jumped out to me. And, I think the problem is even larger where, say we have religious ed students for an hour each week, but then the rest of the week they're out in the culture, and so much of the culture kind of undermines what we're trying to convey to them. And I know I've fallen for this pitfall in the past where I see the students as kind of like walking brains, and I'm going to dispense information. But so for instance, to bring up your ethnic background, you're Irish, and like 2 generations ago, your family members, your ancestors would have had this thick Catholic culture that they were a part of.
Yeah.
And yet today we can kind of, sometimes I hear dismissive remarks like, oh, at least we're beyond cultural Catholicism. And I understand some of the weaknesses that were there, but there were a lot of strengths. And I guess we can't reinvent that culture, but are there things that we can take away from the way people even practiced the faith like half a century ago?
Yeah, I think so, and I think we can learn both from what was successful and learn from what emerged from it, the kind of secularization that emerged from it. The story I always think of is, my dad grew up in both my parents grew up in city neighborhoods in Pittsburgh that were essentially the last years of the old Catholic ghettos, and my dad talks about how in December, the social event of the season wasn't as it is now, the winter semi-formal, whatever. It was Christmas midnight mass, and the boys would ask the girls out to go to mass with them, and they would get them corsages. That was what you did. That was kind of part of the social scene was mass. And on the one hand, I want to say, wow, what a wonderful integration of the faith and of liturgy into everyday life. This is we can definitely learn from that, and I think we can. But what happens when Christmas midnight mass becomes primarily a social engagement? primarily about the cultural or the social, and the mass, the liturgy becomes backgrounded, and that seems to me to be the danger of that. Not a danger in the sense that we should avoid that kind of integration, but a danger that if we were to ever re-achieve that, it would need to be always in the forefront of our minds that we're organizing things in such a way that that the faith does not end up getting backgrounded to what is primarily a cultural or social identity.
This is The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr speaking with Brandon McGinley. You know, the way I put this is I always call it declinations from Christendom, which is just a funny way to say there's sort of stages where you go from the faith being central and then going toward the periphery. I'm not going to name the town, but I lived in it, and it was still one of these old, staunchly German Catholic towns in Kansas. Yeah. And I go, you know what? Like 30 years ago, the priest was at every football game and blessed the football players because the church was the center of life. Yeah. And then when I was there, they're in that first declination down, and like the priest is there blessing the football players because football is the center of life, but everybody wants the priest there. And the third declination will be, why is the priest blessing the players? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Yes, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And yeah, I think that's exactly what we've seen so many places where the church goes from being, like you said, the church goes from being the center of life to being an accompaniment that is considered to be kind of quaint, and this is a nice tradition. It's a small T tradition that has lost its big T traditional value and meaning because we no longer recognize why we do it.
Well, and to make it even more probably caustic and divisive, you see this with, and I mean this is very germane to our show, you see this with religious attitudes towards political life. It's obvious that when the church is at the center of things, politicians come to the church and they're like, oh, how do we get the priest to be on our side, or the bishops, or the nuns, or like this well-to-do family, or blah, 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 blah. But when you get that first declination happening, all of a sudden it's church people who are like, oh, geez, politics is at the center now. We better make sure we seem like an indispensable, member of the courtly, party. And the minute you start doing that is the minute where we start acting like, Catholics should, vote as a block and only for one party. And then that goes even further to, now Catholics don't know how to vote because their identity is with a party first before the faith. And, that to me seems to be a hot button issue that it's, to me, I'm not worried about like going and sorting that out. I'm just saying for listeners to think about how that might have changed. Of course, if the church is at the center of society, the kings and princesses of this world are going to come courting us. And there's even loads of good that was done in Christendom because the kings had to listen to the church. But the minute that slips, and the other way it's around, it's to be frank, is devastating for the church. And even in America, we've seen that. And I think that's a moment for caution.
Yeah, and if I may then take a step further, I would say that not just even in America, but especially in America, especially in a country that has never, in its institutions, even in the ideology and the philosophy that founded it, that has never even considered giving the church a central role. In fact, was designed in large part to prevent the church from taking a central role, from organizing anything, in its own image. And so that's how you end up with the Catholic ghettos, of course, because in the same way as what we're describing in a smaller way right now, trying to build something sustainable in the image of what the church can and should be within a culture that is hostile. So to the extent that we ever thought that, and there was a moment in, 50s through, at least in the 40s and 50s a little bit, then a little bit again in the 80s, and a little bit in the 90s. There are a few moments when it seemed like there may be an opening for the church to become a really formative institution in our politics. But I think it was always a mirage. And now that mirage has been made clear, I think it's actually an opportunity to say, hey, we were never supposed to be playing a big role in this society, and we're going to continue to be prevented from playing a big role in the society, whether it's the know-nothing Protestants of the 19th century or the progressive secularists now. This has never been a place that was supposed to be home for us. And so rather than trying desperately to make it into a home that it was never supposed to be and never will be, rather let's figure out how to live within a society and culture and political institutions that were never meant for us.
Yeah, jumping in here, it's going to sound this morning like I'm just picking on the Benedict option or Rod Dreher, and that's not my goal. I've had conversations with him, and I respect his work. So I'll blame this on interpreters of the Benedict option. But as we're talking about these things, I get the sense that the path forward can't really be an option. And what I mean by that is that the gospel's the pearl of great price. And our Lord presents, this kind of radicality, like once you find this pearl of great price, you'll do anything. And so I'm just worried that when we start to talk about options, that there's this kind of functionality to it, like youth ministers hear that and they think, oh yeah, this is the way I can save the kids. But there's no fail-proof way to save the kids or save society. It's just that the gospel demands a certain way of life. And you see this, so if we want to talk about St. Benedict, Bo, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when he's struggling with lust, he throws himself into a thorn bush, right?
Right.
There's no half-hearted I'm gonna find an option to save this. And again, I'm not saying that's precisely what Rod's saying, but I guess we can't ever talk about these things and think, oh, if we do this, then the result will be Y.
Well, there's no strategic retreat, and I mean, so that is something that Benedict option and people like this say. They talk about strategic retreat, and we'll go back and we'll get stronger, and then we'll come back into society and be able to change it. As a Benedictine Oblate, I always point out that how little of what St. Benedict's life was actually thought through. He had lust, he jumped into the thorn bush. People were like, hey, we want you to be the abbot. And he's like, this is a bad idea. And they're like, do it anyway. They tried to poison and kill him. And he's like, well, time to move on. I mean, everything for him was like the oh crap option, not the Benedict option. He was like, oh, and did something different. And on today of all days, the Feast of All Saints, Brandon, your point is exactly right. Our home is not here. Our home is heaven. The city of God is our home. And we are, in a way, shock troops for allowing colonies of the city of God to populate the earth. And so that doesn't mean that we're going to be on purpose put in a ghetto. I mean, we might be put in a ghetto, but there's a way in which, and maybe this is what I'm hearing underlined in what a lot you're saying, Brandon, is to be obsessed with our status in the society is already to give them too much credit. These cities won't last. The city of God will. Yeah. Whatever we're going to look like in our particular place, we have to keep that in mind. What is the everlasting city? The lasting city is not here.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's right. And I think then that when it comes to building the kinds of Catholic communities that are going to be lasting, I think it becomes kind of a combination of, it's easy to talk in terms of like intentionality and intentional communities. That's a kind of a popular phrase, and the Benedict option is kind of one subset of that. And there's value in that. But as you said, St. Benedict himself was mostly just cobbling things together right. as events unfolded. And that's a lot of what we do. Something changes and we adapt. And the question is, how do we adapt in a way that is faithful to what the truth of the matter is? How do we adapt in a way that's faithful to what the church actually is and what the demands of the gospel are in this time and place? That kind of are revealed to us as events unfold. That doesn't mean there's no intentionality. It doesn't mean we just go moment by moment. In my experience, we've been fortunate to cobble together some, several Catholic families who several of whom live near one another here in Pittsburgh, and what we've discovered is that yes, there's an intentionality to kind of formalizing our friendship, but it doesn't start with the intentionality. It starts with an organic growth in relationship. As we just realized, hey, we hang out all the time. Maybe we should get together and actually talk about what it means to kind of be, Catholic friends and form a community of friends. And so what the intentionality follows the organic development and then formalizes it, rather than saying, hey, I have an idea. I need to find 6 friends and we're going to start a group,
Sorry, Jim, you're 7th. Get out of here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so because of the formalization, that's the intentionality. The formalization of what's already happened, rather than like I said, just saying, hey, I have a big idea. Let's just, create a society.
Yeah, and I think that the another way to put this is, if we get too obsessed with strategies and like you said, formalization, intention, some of these words, we forget the role of providence. And you see this with the saints, to go back, on their feast, that half the time it was like, we weren't planning this, but we're all here together, and clearly God is doing something with us. Now, the only thing I'm going to say, Brandon, speaking on behalf of many people in Des Moines, you guys don't overly providence the Mars out there in Pittsburgh, because everybody has plans to steal him back to Des Moines. Just letting you all know. So, all right, Bud, you have
sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like a challenge. Well, Bud, do you have anything to close out today? We're getting ready to.
No, Brandon, this has been wonderful. As you can tell, you really sparked Bo and I with a lot of conversation. We'd love to have you back on the show. You can become our resident Pittsburghian. We have the Catholic movie guy, the Catholic Bible guy, and you can be the Catholic salad and French fries guy.
That sounds perfect. I'm happy to represent our culinary innovations.
But if listeners are interested in your work, where can they find more about some of what you've written?
So for my personal work, you can find me at brandonmcginley.com. Very, very simple. You can find my essays and a book here and there, and speaking engagements and so forth. And then also, my day job, I work as editor for EWTN Publishing, so you can find our books on EWTN's religious catalog.
Well, thanks so much, Brandon. And just as a heads up, next time we have you on, I want to talk about why we should be careful about overusing the phrase "the dictatorship of relativism."
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
Well, thanks for being with us.
Yep, thanks, Brandon. Yep, God bless.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Bud, so it sounds like you guys are going to go move to a compound and make French fries out in Pittsburgh here pretty soon, buddy.
Yeah, he was making me jealous over dinner on Sunday. He was saying that, they've got, like you said, these committed Catholic families all living in the same neighborhood. I don't think they necessarily planned it, and I was like, well, my neighbors are nice. And
yeah, in many ways, if you're talking about sending up, making characters of stuff, you guys are obviously an evangelical order family, because everywhere you go, you guys have an entire neighborhood that mourns you after you leave. You guys, you're like the feudal lords of a place. All the peasants love you, and they don't know what to do. And I'm not going to be mean here, Bud, but you're less the Baron, and Rachel is more the barrenness. I think that's fair to say. No,
all credit due to Rachel. And Bo, this actually came up in the class, and maybe we could talk about this on a future show. But we would talk about the ways that life in America can be difficult to live faithfully as a Catholic. Whether that's consumerism or whatever it happens to be. And I always use my wife Rachel as an example of someone who, we'll talk about the dangers of the economy becoming global or corporate, you know what I'm saying? And she's always building relationships in the neighborhood, and part of that is she has this kind of almost economic system, like she's trading yeast and yogurt or whatever's growing in our refrigerator at that time. And I think that's kind of an instantiation of what Brandon was talking about, that, you can want to solve things in a moment, but it really starts kind of with that first difficult step, and I really admire Rachel for taking those.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So we can call it the Rachel Marr option if you would like, or the kombucha option. The T-shirts that I'm going to make is Nasty-Rash, Contagious Catholicism.
I think we just stick with that.
Yeah, I think we're really going somewhere with that one.
There's bound to be a patron saint of chickenpox somewhere. Yeah. I would think.
Like the plague saints, the 14 holy helpers. That's there we go. I mean, they'll be confused because usually they're praying to stop the plague, but we're like, spread the wonderful plague of Catholicism. This is really going to confuse Protestants on Reformation Day, Bo.
Well, yeah, Bo, that's right. And I think what that phrase really gets right is like, say you take a kid to a public swimming pool.
Oh, yeah.
And he has chicken pox, and everyone's like, oh,
right.
It catches everyone's attention. If you read the lives of the saints, even though today they can seem, like we talk about plaster saints are sort of like taming them.
Right.
But in their lifetimes, usually the neighborhood, even the bishops can be like, this person,
Yeah.
like we appreciate your love for Jesus. You've gone a little too far this time.
Well, and another thing about this, too, we're running out of time, is, like, you don't need to wear, like, chicken pox apparel. You don't need to wear a shirt that's like, I got chicken pox. Everyone's like, oh, man, you have chicken pox. You don't need to broadcast it. It's just there. And I think that Catholicism, holiness at its best, we don't need Catholic T-shirts. Everyone will be like, oh, you're a Catholic. It's contagious. And that's, friends, is what we have to aim for.
In fact, Padre Pio was like hiding his stigmata, right?
Right.
It's almost like it boils over like a pot, on the oven. Yep.
I agree. Yeah, well, we could talk about this for another hour, but just to run through real quick, we think our listeners are not customers. They are members of this ministry as well. So if you'd like to be a part of this ministry, please remember us in between your bills and be willing to throw out you may be able to send us a donation to help us out and be part of our ministry. I also just got told, I got distracted. The note was that St. Barbara the Great is protector against chickenpox, so I think we have a patron saint for Nasty-Rash, Contagious Catholicism. And then, look, folks, we do so much on that you can do the rosary every morning at 9:30, Bible in a Year at 5 a.m. But anything else you want to say before we shove on off to the next week?
No, really, a blessed All Saints Day to All Souls tomorrow. We're talking about contagious Catholicism. Take your kids to a cemetery this month.
Yep.
Pray for the faithful departed. And I think that will be a way to infect the faith with your children.
Pray for the dead, folks, all month. This has been The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, our families, our city, our state, our nation, and the entire world. This has been The Uncommon Good. We will see you again next Wednesday. God bless, everyone.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio and on the official Iowa Catholic Radio app.